All right, we're at episode 70 of Red versus Blue. Keith, can you believe it?
It's been a wild ride, Mike.
I'm with my co-host, Keith Curry. We're back. We haven't been here for a few weeks, but a lot of stuff, I was going to say something else, a lot of stuff has come down over the last couple of weeks, right?
It really has, Mike. And first of all, Happy New Year to all of our listeners. Thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
But this has been a remarkable period over the last 60 days in the history of our nation and the history of politics. I think it portends for the future.
Now, you're going to run us through the events of the last couple months, right?
As the red part of this equation, I'm going to try and look at the status of the MAGA movement and where the Republicans are. And I'm going to suggest that from the election on November 4th to January 4th, that 60-day period, it's been a remarkable change and turn of events. You know, when Gettysburg happened, nobody at the time knew that was the turning point of the Civil War. And we don't know at the time now whether this is either. But I'm going to suggest that this may very well be the turning point where the Republican Party begins to create a little distance with Donald Trump and sort of move in an independent direction, much to his chagrin.
Okay, I'm going to stop you real quickly and play the blue guy and say, I think at episode 3 of this podcast, we were already predicting the downfall of Donald Trump and MAGA, and here we are at 70. So I'm going to listen very intently to your outlaying all of this, and we'll see where we stand at the end.
We'll do that. And of course, from episode 3 to now, we've had the election, and we had Donald Trump really consolidate his leadership of the Republican Party, his dominance of the Republican Party to the exclusion of all others. But things have changed. Mike, starting first on November the 4th with the off-year election results, the Republicans had their clocks cleaned across the country, not only in Virginia and New Jersey, but also in Mississippi and South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and other states. Republicans saw significant losses and a significant change in the voter coalition. The Black and Hispanic vote that Trump was able to bring into his election dissipated completely. So did young voters, who dissipated completely from the Republican Party, which creates real red flags for people who are running in the midterms next year, and a lot of caution for people who need to be face the voters in 2026. Secondly, we had the discharge petition that allowed the bill to vote on release of the Epstein files. It was bottled up in Congress. Speaker Johnson actually adjourned Congress for more than a month to avoid a vote, but finally a vote was forced. Every single Republican in the House except one voted against Trump to release the files. Every single senator in the Senate, except for one, voted to release the files. Trump finally himself, basically after fighting this thing for a year, said, yeah, go ahead and vote for it. And that led to the release of millions of pages of Epstein files. Apparently there's 5 million more to go. That story is not going to go away, and it's not going to get better. Following that, there was a defeat on the health care bill. Moderate Republicans have pulled off and are requiring and enforcing a vote on health care. And that's still being negotiated in the Congress. In Indiana, the state Senate refused to go along with Trump to redistrict the state. Kansas has recently agreed not to do that as well. Trump has threatened them with primaries, but nonetheless, they defied him and they went ahead. The thing that I thought was the permission slip was the Rob Reiner comments. His comments were so outrageous regarding the Rob Reiner death that a lot of Republicans felt they had a permission slip to criticize the president, and they did. And that was, I think, a unique, break in the dam to see that happen. But then I think you had the really big division, and that's where the Heritage Foundation imploded because of comments that the President Foundation had made in support of speakers like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes that were deemed to be pro-Nazi, anti-Semitic. A big split there over the sort of pro-Nazi Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes branch, and people like Ted Cruz and others who would speak against that. Several of the staff members of the Heritage Foundation quit. They went to work for a rival foundation, ironically run by Mike Pence. The conservatives, unlike the Democrats, there is a ideological underpinning. This whole strategy of Trump is being run according to Project 2025. Reagan had the mandate of leadership, also written by the Heritage Foundation. That stuff counts with conservatives, Now there's rival camps with rival philosophies moving forward. And it's a split that will not go away. The biggest contributor in the Republican Party is Miriam Adelson, Sheldon Adelson's wife, who owned Las Vegas Sands, a major Jewish contributor. She has no take with the pro-Nazi Carlson Owens group. And Vance saw himself sort of in the middle. He can't seem to take a position. That's going to be ground that's not sustainable for him. Dan Bongino is back, and he's taken on Matt Gaetz, and he's what he calls grifters and black tiles and life losers, which I think is mostly the Carlson group of the party. So you're going to have more fights among people on the media. The Supreme Court halted his National Guard deployments in major cities. That was his first major Supreme Court loss. He came out with a Russia peace plan that most Republicans found to be objectionable and downright scary, along with our NATO allies, that he's been forced to back off of. The economy is souring, and affordability is no hoax to the American people. He did give a speech that was an 18-minute rant that was horribly received by the public and by the media. In Colorado, he vetoed a bill for a water project in Lauren Boebart's district simply out of spite, and that's given her really some street cred to stand up against him as well. Republicans have seen that they can do that, and his pardon of the Honduran president has undermined his whole "I'm fighting drugs" strategy. We now have war in Venezuela, and frankly, it's popular. People think removing Maduro is a good thing.
I think that's bipartisan.
It is bipartisan.
In terms of the guy himself. Nobody liked the guy. No, there's no reason for him to be in power, and that part of it, I think people like. But it's, what do we do now?
Well, and there's no good answer to that. So apparently we're expropriating oil, but we're leaving the socialists in charge. We're not supporting the Democratic opposition. We're not helping the people there. It remains to be seen exactly what happens. But it certainly has the potential of being a big mess. And the problem now is that the entire Trump policies are both intellectually incoherent and inconsistent. And so that gives rise and support to these factions that will never be as unified as they were before November 4th. We've got Vance versus Rubio are sort of now leading opposing factions. We'll see if that really develops furthermore. My guess is that there'll be a third Republican. Ted Cruz would like to be that person. It could still be Ron DeSantis. It could be Rand Paul. We'll see who will come out as sort of a third way. With the war in Venezuela, with no plan, no policy, no competence, are we there for oil? Are we there for drugs? Are we there for democracy? It's hard to tell. But with Republicans looking for re-election in a tough midterm cycle, expect to see a lot more independence from Trump. Expect to see a lot more assertion of Congress's traditional role going forward. That's my prediction. I believe this is the turning point, at least for the Republicans, in terms of their willingness and ability and whether they get a free pass or not to oppose the Trump administration.
We have talked about this on the show in terms of just your personal dialogue with other Republicans show this, that a lot of times the infighting is worse than the hate and dislike towards the other party within the Republican Party. Are you seeing that still?
Absolutely. That's always been true. We know Republicans don't like Democrats, but they really hate other Republicans that don't agree with them. And it's because they're easier to fight because, you can control your party's apparatus a little bit better. It goes back to the way, young Republicans operated in terms of multiple factions over the years.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. And it's true for the Democrats, too. I mean, watch the Democratic Socialists and the Democratic moderates go at each other.
Right. So here is an opportunity for the Democrats. And as a Democrat, as a registered Democrat, I don't see any movement in the right direction from them as well. They may get power back by default, right?
They will in the House. They'll lose some strategic opportunities. For example, in Texas, where you have the potential of the Attorney General Ken Paxton beating John Cronin in the primary and making that a winnable seat for Democrats. Everybody's excited about Jasmine Crockett, who has zero chance of winning statewide in Texas. So the Democrats need to be strategic about candidate selection like they were in New Jersey and Virginia, and getting pragmatic candidates that can relate to the electorate. And if they do that, they'll do very well. And if they don't, they won't.
Do you know enough about the Democratic leadership to think that they will be able to put something together?
Well, they have their own fissures right now. And the Mandami victory in New York and the people have the long knives out for Schumer make the Democratic leadership, it's hard to know who the leadership is, frankly.
Right. So, as you said, there's a chance that the Democrats could win some things just by default.
Well, I think they're going to win the House. I think the Trump coalition has been splintered. Hispanic voters and black voters and young voters who voted for Trump and voted for Republicans in the 2024 election abandoned the party in 2025 in huge double-digit numbers. And if that continues, this whole Texas reapportionment thing could backfire because that is based on a continuing trend for Republicans among Hispanics in Texas. And if that doesn't show up at the polls, that whole reapportionment thing is going to be a backfire. What will happen is that we'll have congressional oversight of the Trump administration, which is currently non-existent. And that is what you saw him when he said this week that if the Democrats take control, I'll be impeached. I mean, he sees the handwriting on the wall. The more serious threat is going to be the oversight hearings of the departments and the department heads getting dragged before Congress. And that's going to be a very tough year for the Trump administration.
So let's talk for a second about the Republicans that are leaving Congress. Give us a little rundown on that.
Well, there's 50 members overall in Congress who are leaving, 33 Republicans who are leaving, some to run for higher office, many are retiring, some are resigning, as we saw with Marjorie Taylor Greene this week. And it's going to decimate what's been known as the Freedom Caucus. Chip Roy is running for Attorney General in Texas, Andy Biggs, governor in Arizona, Brian Donalds for governor in Florida, Ralph Norman for governor in South Carolina, Barry Moore for senator in Alabama, Troy Nehls is retiring, Buddy Case is running for governor in Georgia, Mike Collins is retiring, Nancy Mace is running for governor against Ralph Norman, MTG has resigned, Matt Gaetz has resigned a year ago, Elsie Stefanik is not going to run again. So the core group of the Freedom Caucus is going to be gone. Now, they may very well be replaced with people who are just as rabid as they are. But in an election where Trump is not going to be popular, right, and where Democrats are going to win, it's going to be hard to run as a hardcore MAGA person unless you're in a very red district. So I predict that the tone of the Republican caucus will take a decided turn. It's not clear what direction that turn is going to be in, but it will be decided. And a lot of the Freedom Caucus MAGA voices that have been predominant in Congress over the last 2 or 3, 4 years will be gone.
And the people that are leaving Congress, the Republicans specifically, and a lot of them are running for state offices, it sounds like, which from that point of view, they could be maybe even more effective with their politics on a state level than they can be on a federal level. Am I digging too deep into that?
Well, a governor can be a lot more effective than a congressperson. But the problem is if your whole thing as a congressperson is to tear it all down and to defund everything and just be an impediment, that doesn't play well if you're a governor or a mayor or an executive function. You have to actually get stuff done.
Those people will have to walk back some of their rhetoric from their time in Congress, right?
As all executives find out, it's harder to govern than it is to pontificate. If all you do is pontificate, you're going to have a very hard time in an executive position, as many have found in the past.
Gotcha.
And they're going to have to learn how to lead and solve problems.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about at this point? I think we're kind of in for this show especially, we're in a wait and see situation at this point. I mean, you've laid it out pretty well, what has happened over the last couple of months that really do point to a turning point.
Well, if the economy continues to be sort of in the doldrums that it is, and people continue to believe that the country is on the wrong track, there'll be little that Trump can do to reverse those numbers and reverse those trends. The Congress has sort of now latched themselves, for better or worse, to Donald Trump, and that will reflect itself in the November election results. Now is the time for people to create their sort of independent story if they're going to have one, and not many people have.
We are into January now, so the midterms, elections, and the campaigning will start shortly, right?
Filing opens in California in March. It opens, I think, in Texas. It's already open. So, yes, candidates are lining up and positions are being taken, and people are sort of trying to figure out what their next move is.
Well, I think that the way you laid it out today, and again, I remind people we were going to end this podcast at the end of the presidential election, but the way you laid it out today, I don't think we can leave. Do you?
I don't. for example, on Friday, we may very well have a decision on Trump's tariffs. And if the court strikes down tariffs, that's the whole Trump foreign trade policy. We'll see where we go with that. The possibility for chaos on the economy, on tariffs, on the whole immigration thing, on what happens in Venezuela, there is a lot of uncertainty that's happening, and it's all going to impact the election.
I'm convinced we're going to be here now. Here I wanted to end it a long time ago. And, in terms of what we do, it just gets better and better, Even though the events are not better and better, but what we can do and talk about just gets better and better.
Along with the old Chinese proverb, Mike, may you live in interesting times. We have been blessed with that.
Absolutely. Okay, if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to the podcast wherever you subscribe. And now, tell your friends about us. All right, we will be back soon with another edition of Red versus Blue. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Mike. Take care, everybody.